Welcome to the Wellness Lab Digest, where we help you to absorb powerful, life-changing insights from top wellness experts with our daily, bite-sized wellness podcast summaries. Each episode is packed with distilled, powerful takeaways to boost your health and well-being. To support this podcast, please scroll down on whatever app you're listening on. Ratings and reviews are helpful. Even better, just send the show to a friend. Or check out our sponsors at the bottom of the page, or simply click the Support the Show link.
All right, welcome back, everybody. For today's deep dive, we're going to be going into the mind of Yuval Noah Harari.
Okay.
You might know him, the historian and author from his book Sapiens.
Right.
But we're looking at this really fascinating interview that he did with Jay Shetty.
Oh, okay.
For his podcast On Purpose. And Harari's someone who just doesn't shy away from big questions.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those, yeah.
So we're going to be exploring his thoughts on happiness, on education,
Okay.
and why being okay with boredom might actually be a superpower in the 21st century.
Interesting.
One of the things that he throws out that's really intriguing is this equation. Happiness equals reality minus expectations.
Huh.
It really gets you thinking.
Right.
We're also going to look at his claims that corporations and governments are actually in a race to hack our minds.
Oh, wow.
Which, if that's true, can we even call it free will anymore?
That's a good question.
So let's unpack this happiness equation just a little bit. Harari really emphasizes that it's crucial to understand where our expectations come from.
Yeah.
And he even gives this great anecdote about, finding love online, meeting his husband through the internet,
Interesting.
showing that technology, can have its upsides.
Right.
So does that resonate with you at all?
Well, it's good. It is a good reminder that technology itself isn't inherently a problem, right?
Right.
It's what's really important is being aware of how it can shape our expectations.
Yeah.
Think about all the external forces at play here. You've got culture, you've got media, you've got these algorithms that are curating our online feeds.
Yeah.
All of these things are kind of contributing to this picture of what we think will make us happy.
That's true, yeah. It is a little unsettling, though, isn't it? This whole idea of our minds being, hacked.
It is a little creepy, yeah.
Are we really that vulnerable to manipulation? I mean, we see it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, corporations use that, the customer's always right, to justify practices that may not actually be in our best interest.
Right. Well, I think it is a valid concern.
Yeah.
But I don't think Harari's point is to make us feel powerless.
Right.
Instead, he's really urging us to understand how these influences work so we can make more informed choices.
Yeah.
It's about reclaiming a degree of free will, right?
Yeah.
In a world that, yes, is often designed to kind of nudge us in certain directions.
Right, right.
So that's why critical thinking is more crucial now than ever. We need to question our assumptions, and we need to kind of look deeper.
Yeah. And speaking of questioning assumptions, let's shift gears a little bit to education.
Okay.
Harari paints this, pretty unpredictable picture of the future job market.
Yeah.
Especially with things like AI and bioengineering advancing so rapidly. It makes you wonder what skills will even be relevant in the next decade.
Right. Yeah, that's the question. I think if we zoom out to the global picture, he argues that all this rapid advancement could lead to even greater inequality.
Right. You have countries like the U.S. that are at the forefront of this AI revolution.
Yeah.
That could potentially be seeing massive economic benefits from it.
Right.
But then you have countries that rely really heavily on manual labor.
Right.
Places like Mexico, Honduras, that risk being left behind.
Yeah.
He emphasizes that simply throwing money at the problem isn't enough.
Right.
We need global solutions, and we need a real shift in how we approach education.
Okay. So let's put you in the hot seat for a second.
Right.
Imagine you're in charge of building an education system
Okay.
in a country like Honduras. What skills would you prioritize to prepare students for this really uncertain future?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it really highlights this need for what we might call slow thinking.
Yeah.
It's about taking time for reflection and deep consideration.
Right.
Even when you're faced with these immediate challenges.
Yeah.
He talks about these recent protests in France against President Macron.
A lot of citizens felt so overwhelmed by these, immediate financial concerns that they felt unable to prioritize long-term issues like climate change.
Right, yeah.
So it shows how tough it can be to balance those urgent needs with the things that are important for the long haul.
It's like we're constantly putting out fires instead of like thinking about how to prevent them in the first place.
Yeah.
But this struggle to prioritize that long view actually leads us perfectly into something Harari calls the boring movement.
Okay.
He actually thinks that embracing boredom is key to deeper thinking and creativity.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know about you, but I'm definitely guilty of grabbing my phone the second I feel a hint of boredom coming on.
I think that's the dopamine rush that we're all susceptible to. Like, we're so wired for constant stimulation that it's no wonder we find it so hard to just be, just sit in those quieter moments without needing to fill the space.
Yeah.
As Harari points out, even companies like Netflix recognize this.
Oh, yeah.
They say their biggest competitor is sleep.
It's true. It's true. So how do we cultivate a better relationship with boredom in this like hyper-connected world? I'm especially curious about how this plays out in relationships.
Yeah.
Harari makes this, interesting observation that he says it's easier to connect with someone far away online than it is to connect with the person right next to you.
Oh, wow.
If they're constantly on their phone.
Right. I think there's a real irony there. Yeah. And it kind of speaks to how technology, while connecting us in some ways, might actually be eroding these essential social skills that we need to navigate real-world relationships.
Right.
Tristan Harris.
Oh, yeah.
You might have heard of him, the tech ethicist.
Yeah.
He even uses this term, downgrading human.
Oh, wow.
To describe how technology can make us less resilient by making it too easy to avoid those messy, complex parts of human interaction.
It's like we're getting really good at curating, these perfect online personas.
Right.
But then we struggle when we're faced with the raw, unfiltered reality of being in a room with another human being.
Absolutely.
I think that resonates with a lot of people, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. And when you think about it, this disconnect feeds directly into that problem of filter bubbles.
Right.
We're surrounded by these echo chambers that only reinforce our existing beliefs and make it harder to engage with perspectives we might not agree with.
No wonder there's so much polarization these days.
Right.
It's hard to have a productive conversation, let alone, find common ground when you're stuck in your own little world.
I think this brings us back to the importance of humility.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that our own viewpoint is just one among many, and we have a lot to learn from others, even those we might disagree with. Harari tells this great anecdote about a yoga teacher he met.
Oh, okay.
Who was absolutely convinced that yoga was invented by Abraham.
Oh.
And that the poses represented Hebrew letters.
Okay, that's quite a perspective. That just goes to show how easily we can fall into the trap of believing our own narrative is the only true one.
Right, exactly. And I think when we zoom out and look at human history from a broader perspective, it becomes clear that none of us are at the center of the universe, right?
Right.
We're all interconnected.
Right.
And our individual stories are just these small threads in this much larger, more complex tapestry.
So much of our daily lives depend on innovations and contributions from all over the world.
Right.
I mean, think about it, like the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the technology we use. It's all a product of global collaboration.
Precisely. And that realization should underscore the importance of cultivating empathy and understanding across cultures and nations. And it's not just about being politically correct.
Right.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity and acknowledging that we all have something to offer, something to learn from one another.
It seems like one of Harari's key messages here is that this interconnectedness isn't just some abstract idea.
Right.
It's a reality that affects us all and one that we need to be actively engaging with.
Totally.
Not shying away from.
Absolutely. And that's where that emphasis on education comes into play again.
Right.
He argues that we need to prepare future generations with the tools and the mindset to navigate this increasingly complex and interconnected world. It's not just about memorizing facts or mastering specific skills. It's about fostering critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and that ability to collaborate with people from diverse backgrounds.
So it's not just about finding a job.
Right.
It's about finding a purpose.
Right.
A way to make a meaningful contribution to the world.
And Harari believes that that sense of purpose is essential for human happiness and fulfillment. He talks about the importance of cultivating what he calls mental immunity.
Oh, okay.
Which is this ability to discern between information that is beneficial and information that is harmful, not just for ourselves, but for society as a whole.
So we need to be more discerning about what we consume.
Yeah.
Not just in terms of like food and products,
Right.
but also in terms of information and ideas.
Absolutely. We're bombarded with so much content these days.
Right. Like, how do we even begin to filter through it all?
That's where I think those boring practices that he mentioned earlier become really valuable.
Yeah.
You know, taking time for quiet reflection, engaging in activities that require deep focus and concentration.
Right.
Those things help us cultivate that mental clarity and the resilience we need to kind of navigate that information overload of the modern world.
It's like building those mental muscles.
Right.
So we're not so easily swayed by that constant barrage of headlines and notifications and opinions.
Exactly. And that's not to say that we should, like, shut ourselves off from the world. It's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
You know, engaging with the world, being informed, but also cultivating that inner stillness and discernment that allows us to make wise choices, you know, both for ourselves and for the world around us.
This reminds me of something else Harari talks about in the interview, the importance of understanding our own minds. He's a big advocate for meditation.
Yeah.
Specifically a type called Vipassana meditation.
Okay.
Which is all about observing your thoughts and sensations without judgment.
Right.
He says that many people actually find it challenging, especially when boredom sets in.
He makes a really fascinating point, that boredom is often more difficult to deal with than pain.
Really?
We tend to associate pain with something heroic, right? Like pushing through a physical challenge. Yeah. But boredom, he says, can make us feel really small and insignificant, like we're wasting time.
It's so true. We live in a culture that prizes productivity and constant stimulation that it's so easy to forget how to just be with ourselves.
Totally.
To just sit with discomfort and see what arises.
Yeah.
But Harari argues that this ability to embrace boredom is actually crucial for self-discovery and creativity.
He believes that a lot of the most interesting conversations and experiences arise from those moments of quiet reflection, where we allow ourselves to kind of wander and explore without a predetermined agenda. Think about those like spontaneous moments of connection that happen when you're not trying so hard to be interesting or impressive.
Right, totally. It's like when you're on like a long road trip and you finally stop trying to fill every silence with music or podcasts.
Right.
That's when those real conversations start to flow.
Exactly. And Harari believes that this same principle applies to our inner world. When we can sit with that discomfort of boredom, we create space for those new insights and ideas to emerge.
So in a way, boredom becomes a portal to creativity and self-awareness.
Precisely. And he argues that this ability to be comfortable with boredom is becoming even more important in the age of AI.
Right.
You know, as machines become more adept at performing these routine tasks, human creativity and critical thinking skills are going to be even more valuable.
So learning to embrace boredom might just be the key to thriving in the future job market. Who knew?
It's an unexpected advantage, right?
Yeah, it is.
But it makes sense when you consider the demands of a world where innovation and adaptability are going to be essential.
Okay, so we've talked about happiness, we've talked about education, we've talked about boredom.
Yeah.
But there's one more big theme that runs through this interview, and that's technology and its impact on our lives.
Right.
You know, Harari is obviously aware of the benefits of technology.
Yeah.
I mean, after all, he met his husband online. But he's also deeply concerned about its potential to manipulate and control us.
He talks about this race to hack the human mind.
Oh, wow.
Where corporations and governments are constantly developing new ways to influence our thoughts, behaviors, and even emotions.
It's a little unsettling, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
It makes you wonder how much of our so-called free will is actually just a product of clever marketing and algorithms.
Well, Harari argues that the more we believe in free will, the easier we are to manipulate.
Oh, how so?
Because we just assume that our thoughts and desires are authentic, right?
Right.
So we're less likely to question where they're coming from and who might be influencing them.
So we need to be more critical of our own thoughts and desires. Not just accept them at face value, but really examine where they're coming from.
Exactly. And that's where practices like meditation can be so helpful.
Right.
You know, by training ourselves to observe our thoughts without judgment. we can start to detach from them and gain a greater sense of agency.
It's like we're becoming scientists of our own minds.
Right.
Studying our thoughts and emotions with curiosity and detachment.
It's a fascinating shift in perspective, isn't it? Instead of being swept away by our thoughts and emotions, we can start to see them as objects of study, like these patterns of energy that arise and pass away.
It's almost like stepping outside of the current of our own thoughts and just watching them flow by. But while exploring our inner world is important, Harari doesn't shy away from the reality of the external world. He actually uses this very striking analogy. He says it's easier to delete a Facebook friend who annoys you than it is to deal with a difficult neighbor.
Oh, wow.
What do you think he's getting at with that?
Well, I think he's highlighting how technology, while making life more convenient in a lot of ways, might also be weakening our ability to handle the complexities of those real-world relationships.
Right.
Think about it. Online, we have this power to curate our interactions.
Right.
We can block or unfriend anyone who challenges us.
Yeah.
But in real life, those messy, difficult interactions, those are unavoidable.
Right.
And learning how to navigate them is crucial for developing empathy, resilience, all those all-important social skills.
It makes you wonder if we're trading that genuine connection for like the comfort of these carefully curated online interactions.
Right.
And while that might feel safe and easy in the short term,
Yeah.
could it be that we're actually limiting our own growth and capacity for intimacy?
That's a really key question that Harari raises. He doesn't offer any easy answers, but he emphasizes the importance of cultivating that self-awareness and critical thinking, especially when it comes to technology. He encourages us to question our assumptions, examine our biases, and approach the information we encounter, both online and offline, with a healthy dose of skepticism.
So it's about becoming more mindful consumers. Not just of products, but of information and ideas.
Exactly.
How do we decide what to pay attention to in a world that's constantly vying for our attention?
Well, he brings this really interesting concept of collective humility, which is this idea that we all have a tendency to believe our own group, our own perspective is the most important one. But history shows us time and again that no single narrative is the whole story, right? We're all interconnected. And recognizing that is absolutely crucial for navigating the challenges that we face as a global community.
I love that phrase, collective humility. It's a really powerful reminder that none of us have all the answers.
It's true.
It's about being open to learning from others, even those who see the world very differently than we do.
Exactly. And this kind of ties back to that need for a more holistic approach to education. Harari argues that we need to move beyond, rote memorization and standardized testing.
And instead focus on nurturing critical thinking skills, emotional intelligence, and the ability to collaborate across differences.
So it's about preparing young people, not just for the job market, but for the complexities of being a human in the 21st century.
Totally.
It's about equipping them with the tools and the mindset to navigate a world that is constantly changing, to be adaptable, resilient, and engaged citizens.
He ends the interview with this really thought-provoking statement. He says, if you're spending more time looking at a screen than in someone else's eyes, you have a problem.
Wow, that's powerful. It's such a simple statement, but it cuts right to the heart of the matter, doesn't it?
It really does. It's a call to kind of reclaim those essential human qualities that we risk losing in a world that's dominated by technology. That ability to connect, to empathize, to see the world through another person's eyes. I think that's a great place to leave our listeners with some food for thought. If you're ready to take a deep dive into your own life, inspired by what we've learned from Harari, here are a few questions to ponder. First, where do your expectations for happiness come from? Are they realistic? How are they being shaped by these external forces? Second, what skills do you think are most crucial for navigating the future? For yourself, for your kids, for the world as a whole, how can we prioritize those things, both in our education systems and in our own personal growth? And finally, what are those boring activities that actually bring you a sense of peace, joy, or connection? Is it taking a walk in nature? Having a deep conversation with a loved one? Maybe just sitting in stillness and observing your breath? Whatever it is, make time for it. Embrace those moments of quiet reflection and see what emerges. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the mind of Yuval Noah Harari. We'll see you next time for another exploration of these fascinating ideas and inspiring insights.
Thank you for listening to the Wellness Lab Digest. If you receive value from the podcast, I have 3 asks of you. 1, share the show on social media with your friends and tag the show at the Wellness Lab Digest on Instagram. Number 2, please leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening on. And last but not least, please let me know what topics you would like us to cover in the future. You can contact me at empoweringmen.org/contact. And right now we have a free ebook to get you started on your wellness journey as well. That's empoweringmen.org/contact. To support this podcast, check out our sponsors at the bottom of the page or simply click the Support the Show link.